Yeah, I want to say a special good evening to everyone on the live, Radio Grenadines live. We're on Weather Watch, and this is where we will be looking at Tropical Storm Gonzalo. And basically, the purpose is to pass on information. Today, we'll be networking. We'll be having a conversation with Abdan White, who is a member of the Disaster Preparedness Committee on Union Island, and we'll be also connecting with Rochelle Tanis out of Beckway. She's the um, chairman for the Beckway Disaster Committee, the president, and we'll be hearing from what some of the preparatory actions taking place in Beckway. So let me bring in Abdan. Both of them are backstage. Abdan, good afternoon once again.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Good evening, Stan. Nice having me
And
here again.
let's
So,
see if we could bring in Rochelle. And Rochelle, welcome to the show and good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
All right, and we want to tell persons on the live to share the live because Facebook has been acting up recently these days. Not everyone get the notification of the live, so just hit share so we could get the show on the road, and we'll go right into it. What I would do is just go through a quick. But just before I do that, I will allow Rochelle to introduce herself. We already heard about from Abdan yesterday. We'll allow Rochelle to introduce herself quickly and just give us a brief overview of the disaster committee on Beckway.
Okay, good afternoon again to everyone. Good evening. My name is Rochelle Tanis. I'm from Beckway, the current chairperson for the Beckway Disaster Preparedness Committee. Our deputy chair is Mr. Kenrick Frederick, secretary Lydia Oliver, treasurer Rani Gregg, secretary, treasurer, Sister Marie Simmons, and our PRO is Gwinnell Hazel. We have subcommittees as well that would assist in different areas. Our committee basically was a long-standing committee. It went a bit dormant for a while, but then it revived back just within the last year or so. But yeah, we're up and running and doing our best to make sure that we prepare the island and keep abreast of all the weather that is taking place.
Right, lovely. So what I would do is go right into the 5 o'clock advisory from the Argyle Met Services, and Hurricane Watch still remains. As you know, Hurricane Watch was enforced from 8 a.m. this morning. Hurricane Watch means that hurricane conditions are possible within the watch area, generally within 48 hours. And at 5 p.m., Tropical Storm Gonzalo was centered near 9.8 north, 49 west, or about 810 miles east of the southern Windward Islands, moving westward near 13 miles per hour, with a maximum sustained winds of near 60 miles per hour, with higher gusts and minimum central pressure at 1,000 millibars. And if you remember from yesterday, we had the same pressure, so which means that we didn't see there was no drop in pressure. And the possible impacts is Gonzalo is a tiny tropical storm with tropical storm force wind extending outwards up to 25 miles from the center. And hurricane conditions could possibly spread across our islands by late Saturday. Showers and thunderstorm could increase across SVG during Friday and continues Saturday as Gonzalo crosses the southern Windward Islands. Rainfall accumulation, and this is something that we need to pay attention to. Rainfall accumulations near 3 to 4 inches with greater amounts in isolated areas could result in life-threatening flash flooding in low-lying areas. Large easterly swells of 3 to 4 meters are also likely across the island late Saturday, and these will create unsafe conditions for small craft operators. And we could have a quick view of the trajectory, and it should be up on the screen now. So it shows the storm was forecast to move into an hurricane, up to upgrade into an hurricane today. However, it's still a storm. But as you could see from the present part, shows that it passes right through the Grenadines, and we could play a quick loop so that you could see what this storm actually looks like. So you could actually see a little bit disorganizing from yesterday's image. Some more information. The Prime Minister gave a briefing at 5:30 today, and to sum it up, he basically stated that the models are conflicting in terms of intensity and trajectory, and we could start feeling the impacts early Saturday morning into Sunday with moderate to heavy showers. And the center, well, he stated that the center would pass right through the Grenadines with potential for heavy rainfall, and he was reflecting on the areas prone to flooding, especially from the 2013 floods, and he's appealing to the coastal communities to take precautions, to secure your boats, secure your property, and especially the emergency shelter as relates to COVID-19. He was appealing for persons with COVID-19 who are positive should make contact, who are positive and should want to move from their present location should make contact with the Ministry of Health, and also persons should follow the COVID-19 guidelines and to secure your water, food, medicine, and emergency supply. So what we want to do is go straight to Rochelle for her to tell us what are some of the measures they have in mind for Beckway. What's going on in Beckway, Rochelle?
Okay, well, we have started mobilizing and alerting the shelters, the shelter managers, because we will not be opening all of the shelter locations will not be open in the initial stage. When the government gives the go-ahead and NEMO advises that the shelters be open, we would have 4 shelters at various locations open. All the protocols in regards to COVID would be maintained. We know everybody should be wearing their mask as they enter into the shelter. There would be temperature checks done at the shelters morning and evening, and persons displaying any signs or symptoms, the district health facility would be informed immediately so that, and the persons would also be quarantined. At the shelters, we were allocating a designated area that should somebody show any symptoms, we would separate them from the general population. And as the health team is informed, then steps would be taken from there. But at all the shelters, there should be an area separated, so we would not have anybody intermingling with everybody, so that contacts would be spread. As I said before, 4 shelters. That's the Beckway Anglican Primary School in Port Elizabeth, the Kingdom Hall Jehovah's Witness in Friendship, the Apostolic Faith Mission at Paget Farm, and the St. Michael's Catholic Church and Preschool in Hamilton. So from one end of the island to the next, the shelters would be open, and we're advising persons, if you are in a vulnerable location, the areas that are prone to flooding and landslides due to the heavy rains and such, then advise, as the Prime Minister had stated, you get in contact with your health team and we make arrangements and move ahead of the storm. Don't wait until during the storm to try to seek shelter if you end up in difficulties. It's always better that you be prepared. And we're advising persons to make sure that they have their necessary emergency supplies, at least 3 days supply of food and water. You walk with your sheets and your blankets. Make sure you have a face mask, your disinfectant wipes, hand sanitizers, things like that, to make sure that you're constantly sanitizing. Now, everybody, again, as we said, everybody in the shelters, anybody who seeks shelter, you must wear a mask. We're keeping families together and communities together. So in the event that we have to do any contact tracing, it's simpler. You have persons within the community and families are together. So, it would be easier to trace back if needed. And
Yeah,
that is also helping to keep things at a minimum.
right. Could you just go over back the shelters? Could you go over all the shelters for Beckway and then state the ones that would be open initially?
Okay, so Beckway we have currently 10 shelters, which is the Beckway Anglican Primary School located at Port Elizabeth, Beckway, the Evangelical Church at Port Elizabeth, the Pentecostal Church at Union Vale, the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses at Friendship Bay, Beckway, the Apostolic Faith Mission at Paget Farm Community Center, that's also at Paget Farm, the Paget Farm SDA Church, the Port Elizabeth SDA Church, Paget Farm Evangelical Church, and the St. Michael's Catholic Church and Preschool. Now, some of what we had recognized as we're looking at the shelters, the group had recognized that some shelters would work best as post shelters. So, for instance, the Paget Farm Community Center, because of the situation with the glasses, the windows around, that one would be designated as a post shelter, and also a distribution center. If after when we do our distribution, we would have that as a designated area for distribution. And we would have different, we'd have a designated place in Port Elizabeth as well. So at the initial stage, when the go-ahead is given from NEMO to open the shelters, 4 shelters would be open, which is the Beckway Anglican Primary School at Port Elizabeth, the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witness at Friendship Bay, the Apostolic Faith Mission at Paget Farm, and the St. Michael's Catholic Church and Preschool at Hamilton. So you have one buried around the different communities.
Right. So, Rochelle, it might seem like a frivolous question, but what was the procedure for someone coming to the shelter? Do they just pack their bags and just turn up by the shelter, or do they have to call the shelter manager before, or what's the procedure?
Well, okay, so as we stated before, we're advising persons, if you know that you're in a vulnerable area. So for instance, there are different areas in Paget Farm that is vulnerable to landslides, sea surging as such. We advise you can get into contact. At the Beckway Anglican School, the principal is the point of contact person there. The shelter manager would be Lydia Oliver. Persons can get in contact with us, or even myself or Randy Gregg, any one of the members of the disaster committee, and we can make arrangements to have you into the shelter beforehand. Should you run into difficulties during the time, then as you get to the shelter, you would be registered. The shelter managers at each of the shelters would register you. They would do a temperature check. Your name would be recorded. If you come in as a family, every member of the family would be recorded, and you would have your bags and everything packed as as we had stated before, because you have to make sure, it's not that you're coming empty-handed as you go to the shelter in the initial stages. You're always advised to be prepared. Make sure while you're at home you have your family emergency kit, your medications. If you have persons that take regular medication, your diabetics or asthma persons, any necessities that you need, you make sure you put all those things in a kit bag with your clothes and water to last you for at least 3 days, and some canned items that you would have to utilize as food supplies. So you make sure that you have something to walk with as you go there.
Right. So I want to shout out everyone on who's joining us live. We have a question from Carlene Douglas, and this is a question that both Abdan and Rochelle. If you're now joining the show, we're speaking to Rochelle Tanis all the way in Beckway. She's part of the Beckway Disaster Preparedness Committee, and we also have Abdan White, a member of the Union Island Disaster Preparedness Committee. So we have a question from Carlene Douglas. Good evening. Will there be masks available at the shelters in case individuals show up without? Rochelle, you could go for us.
Yes, we're going to make sure that there would be a supply of masks available at the shelters, both for the shelter managers to use, as well as if anybody shows up without the mask. But supplies, we don't know the amount of persons that may enter. So while we would try to make sure that we have supplies at hand, we're still encouraging persons to keep a supply of masks available as well. But yes, we will have masks available.
I know Abdan, I know your team would be meeting sometime tomorrow. I don't want to put you on the spot, but yesterday you appealed for persons to come to the shelter with masks, with their own masks. I don't know how much you could shed some light on this question.
Well, as I told you, I'm also the shelter manager for the Union Island Secondary School. So we have also a limited supply of masks. But we are also encouraging persons. I would definitely have more information tomorrow because the chairman sent out some information today for us to meet tomorrow. But persons definitely would be required to walk with their mask, and I believe that at all the shelters but there would be a limited supply, as Rochelle said. So I don't want persons showing up to the shelter expecting there to be mask, but in the event, because sometimes there are emergencies and persons have to leave their home quickly to find safety at one of the many shelters that we have. So I'm supposing here that the other shelters, for my shelter, I know for sure we would have a limited supply of masks at that shelter.
All right, and we just have some information coming in from the Fisheries Department, the Fisheries Division, Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry. Hurricane hints for fishers and boat owners. Remove and secure all boats, engines, and gear. Secure boats away from the reach of waves, fallen trees, and branches. Turn boats upside down and tie securely to poles. Move all large vessels to safe harbor. And if time permits, remove fish pots and nets from the water 24 to 36 hours before the storm, but only if time permits. So don't go try grabbing them in the last minute. All hauling of boats should cease at 6 hours before the storm. Contact all friends and relatives at sea and ask them to return to land immediately. And if you're unable to reach anyone at sea, please notify the Fisheries Division at 456-2738 or 456-1178 or the Coast Guard 457-4554. And do not attempt to go fishing. And remember, the safest place is out of the water. And I remember I've done the last hurricane season. We were by a bar by the waterside. I wouldn't mention the location. But I think the name of the bar is Tropical Depression. and them guys was there was a storm passing more closer to Grenada, and them guys was barbecuing fish, barbecuing fish and watching for the storm.
I know it's a typical thing that persons do, especially persons who have yachts and the bigger boats. They lime closer to the area in the event that you know their boats get in some sort of trouble. But that is not, we're not advising that. We're advising a person to definitely stay home and stay somewhere safe. You were mentioning some of the things, and I remember we were discussing earlier, Stan, that one of the things persons could do also is to fill their boats with water, the smaller boats, if they can turn it over, remove your engines, remove the batteries and other electrical stuff that you have in your boat. And you could actually fill a boat with water to prevent it. If your boat is on a trailer, you make sure you air down the tires and tie it down properly to the trailer, just to make sure that your investment is properly secured.
Right. So we got a question from Tariq Alexander. So can you tell if the storm really hitting us, and if so, when? Well, to tell if the storm really hitting us, we wouldn't be able to stay, but the current path shows that the storm would be passing directly through the Grenadines. But as the meteorologists and the forecasters indicated, the models are conflicting. But the best thing to do, Abdan, is to
prepare. You definitely need to be
right.
prepared.
Definitely.
Everyone needs to be prepared.
Right. So the show is basically to provide update on the current forecast. Is not to predict because we're not forecasters, but what the show is really about is to ensure that persons pass the message of preparedness across, because it doesn't really matter when, if it's slightly over to Beckway or if it's slightly to Grenada. The important thing is for us to just treat it with importance and be prepared.
Yeah, because if you remember, a couple when Ivan hit Grenada, the Grenadians felt that the storm would pass to the north of them, and then basically in the last few hours, the storm changed direction. So intensity could change at any time. The direction of the storm could change at any time. So the best thing every family could do, every person could do, is prepare for it, because now today we could say it's a although the models are conflicting, one of the models that is way out could actually be the model that the storm moves closer to. And so in that case, then it is important that everyone takes it seriously and be prepared.
And what we've seen over the years is rapid intensifying, where you could have like a category one or even a storm, and that just a couple of miles out, and then that storm rapidly intensifies past category one, two, three. We saw it happen with Maria and the other storms, and we just had to be prepared. We can't just say, well, a small storm. The important thing is for us to secure ourselves.
And the thing that I realize that some persons don't understand is weather is a very fickle type of thing, because even here on Beckway, sometimes you may see within the same storm, one area is affected worse than the other. So you can always look and say, okay, it doesn't look like it's going to pass. Or sometimes people keep praying and saying, okay, we're blessed, everything is going to pass. Yes, we would pray that things pass and that everybody stays safe. But again, always be prepared. You never know what. It's always better to be prepared than to sit there and then at the last minute something happens and you're caught unprepared.
Yeah, and we just wanna show you a quick photo that we came across sometime back with actually Luther's house, Luther the crowd motivator, and this is a wide shot. We have one, two, three, four windows, and these are actually hurricane shutters that he a style that he came up with. I mean, I found this to be really really simple and easy. It's actually groove ply, and it's cut to the exact size of the window frame, and I would get a much closer photo for you. All right, so um, just put on some bolts, and drill some holes so it's fitted inside the window frame, and you just bolt it up and go. What do you think about that, Rochelle?
That's a very neat idea.
Yeah, it's let me move this comment
It's
so you
at
can see the
hand, so
bottom.
you just have to lift it up and bolt it in quick and
Yeah,
ready to go.
yeah, something that I thought I would have I had to bring back in because it's simple. It's simple to do. You don't have to do no external mounting of hinges, and just 4 bolts and some holes. But maybe you might be have to you might have to be careful when drilling the holes, like especially on the window sills. It's these sills tend to crack easy, so you'd have to probably use maybe a special kind of drill to get that done. Let's go back to some comments before we get into something more. I noticed very. Oh, Ms. Hackett is asking, do they have telephone numbers for persons in charge? This comment was from when you were detailing the shelter managers. I don't know if you are allowed to give them out. Maybe it's might be public information.
Yeah, I would have to get back in terms of giving out because for other persons, I know I can give for myself, but for the other persons, I'll have to check and make sure first because mostly persons are aware within the communities because they know persons already. They will know how to contact the persons within their community. But yeah, if persons need to get in touch with myself as the chair, my contact is 454-7140.
As that most of the shelters are schools, and they have persons working there. They could. The first thing persons have to do is identify the shelter closest to them and use that time tomorrow, one, to assess their surroundings, assess their home, and once they believe that, look, things just ain't looking too right, then you go to the shelter closest to you, reach out to the shelter manager, talk to the shelter manager, and you guys could decide whether it's the best thing for you to move or not. But make that assessment, know which shelter is closest to you, know how you're going to get to the shelter in the event of that you may have to leave. But the best thing is to leave early and try and get in contact with your shelter, visit your shelter, see what is there, and to see what other stuff you may need to work with to be comfortable. But definitely, persons could use the day tomorrow to take a look at the shelter closest to them, and they could decide whether or not they if they're going to move into a shelter, what they need to work with.
Right. So comment from the disaster committee itself. We went through this yesterday with Abdan. So Rochelle, what's the methods of notification? How do you notify persons on Beckway, especially persons who are not on might be listening radio or into social media and stuff like that? What methods do you use to notify persons of the upcoming storm or any weather event?
Okay. Well, we use various methods. I have a lot of contacts through WhatsApp that we would share updates and encourage persons to share them around. We have also been going around and identifying our vulnerable persons to let them know that the storm is approaching and to be prepared and the option to enter into the shelter. So here mostly there's not that much persons who would utilize the shelters from past experiences. It's mostly the most vulnerable areas have been Paget Farm, as stated before. Those in that area, they they're pretty much on the ball. We try to keep abreast by going around. I have been through the area this afternoon, and we're planning tomorrow also to, when we get the megaphone, that we would go around and alert persons as well to make sure that they check if they're in the vulnerable position to head to the shelters as early as possible, to give them that notification via that medium as well.
And what about the elderly? How is the elderly treated in terms of evacuation?
Right, that because the elderly would also come under some of our most vulnerable, especially in the Paget Farm area. Most of the vulnerable persons, the elderlies in that area, the family members usually take control, and they would make sure that they get them out of the area. And of the most vulnerable ones that we had identified, we also have a list of the vulnerable persons, so we would go around and make a check. We have Red Cross volunteers as well that assist in, so we would make contact with the vulnerable and the elderly persons. Those who do not stay with family, we would try to make arrangements so that they would enter into a shelter if needed. Most of the persons, they usually stay there. As I said before, there's not that much persons. Paget Farm may be the most, but most persons, they stay with their family members or usually at the home areas. But we try to keep a check to make sure that, we cover our vulnerable, and not just the elderlies, but persons with disabilities as well.
And then we have a comment here from Ms. Douglas. You are definitely correct, but take this scenario. For instance, someone is going to a shelter, but on their way, their possessions are lost. There should be extra just in case.
No, yeah, definitely. But as we said, as Rochelle said, and as I spoke about yesterday, persons should not be going to the shelter during the storm. Persons should do the assessment and decide whether it's best for them to go to the shelter before the storm. We're not advising persons really to leave their house during the storm to go to the shelter. We're advising them to get to the shelter when the storm is not already upon us. So, Ms. Douglas, Douglas is definitely correct. We should, especially in this COVID time. But it's not a case where there's a large availability of masks all over the place. Um, so each shelter may just have a minimum amount. And we're really hoping that persons would not have to use the shelters. Um, as a shelter manager, I'm hoping that persons do not have to use the shelter. But if they do have to use the shelter, get there early, get there in time so that they could settle in and they could be comfortable, and we could make a check to make sure they have everything, do their temperature checks and all that, because it's difficult to do temperature checks when the storm is going on and take all that information and all of that. So any person looking to come to the shelters, we are advising them to do so ahead of time.
All right. It seems like we had lost Rochelle there just for a minute. She's now coming in back. We have a comment from watching from Belgium. Stay safe, Union. Right, Rochelle, we lost you there for a minute, but you're back.
Yeah.
So we're moving right on to now. They're expecting about 3 to 4 inches of rain from this system. What do we know about the vulnerable areas in both Beckway and Union Island in terms of flooding? And also we could touch on landslides. Some people may talk about falling rocks, water runoffs through the gutters. Rochelle, what can you tell us about and I know you're also involved in the Red Cross. And sometime back we saw some severe flooding in Beckway. What can you tell us about flooding in Beckway?
Yes. Like we said initially, Hatchet Farm is one of the most vulnerable areas on Beckway. It is prone to flooding and land slippage due to water runoff from the heavy rains up in that area that's commonly called Pophole. There's water runoff, and that can create problems coming through in some areas, as well as the sea surging around the areas such as down where the fisheries is, down towards the airport side. And the last flooding that we had that affected Port Elizabeth as well, all depending on how the storm passes and the amount of rainfall that we have, that we might get. Port Elizabeth areas may also be flooded. I remember we had a very severe flooding where there was a lot of debris around the schools and the churches coming all into the Port Elizabeth area, coming around to the harbor from nights. Right, so we're encouraging persons again. You have to know the community. We know what are vulnerable areas, the persons that live in those areas that prone to the slippage and the flooding and sea surging as such. Make sure that you get in a safer place before the storm approaches.
Right. Abdan, what can you tell us about Union Island? I know you recently completed the tsunami mapping exercise. So you and maybe other than the tsunami mapping, you're someone who knows the terrain of Union Island well. You know all the low areas and the high
Right.
areas. Let's talk about flooding from either from sea surge or from heavy rainfall, as we're expecting 3 to 4 inches of rainfall.
One of the areas that we know that will definitely be affected would be the town, Clifton. Normally, hurricanes would bring storm surges. And basically, what happens is that the sea level rise, so when the water try to drain out from the land, it kind of prevents that, and you have a buildup on the land. Um, Two things we have going for us. One, there hasn't been a lot of rainfall, so the ground is not very saturated. However, Clifton has very poor drainage, very, very poor drainage. So the areas, for example, from let's say Reggae Lounge all the way down to the bottom of Clifton Hill, basically most of those areas is inhabited by businesses. So that is one of the high risk areas. Some of them are actually below sea level. So persons should take the time out tomorrow to whether it's get sandbags, get your refrigerators or your appliances at a higher level, secure important documents, because definitely there will, if once the storm passes and bring that amount of rain over Union Island, there is going to be some flood, because I've seen less rain, and we've had flooding in Clifton. In Ashton, in terms of some of the more populated areas, we have Central Ashton spanning from the Gospel Hall Church all the way down to Crossroad, and that area from Crossroad going up to the police station area, and an area we call Swamp. You have a large storm drain, what we call the Dry River, that is running all the way through Ashton. Once we get more than 3-4 inches of rain, and the rain comes for an extended period of time, there will be some flooding in that area. So persons living along the Dry River on both sides, and persons living on the road going up to the police station, the basketball court area, that lives close to the road, especially on the bottom side to the sea, they have to take all the necessary precaution. But some of the other things, we've gone through a terrible dry season. So far, we don't have a lot of canopy cover on the hillside because the trees are barely just getting back their leaves. So Union is not really prone to landslides. However, persons have to pay very close attention. Those persons living on the hillside, especially on the Big Hill and Cashew Hill and those areas of stones, sliding down the hill. Um, but another important thing, we have to make sure that the gutters behind our houses are properly cleared, and even gutters close to our houses, they're cleared because, as I said, we just came out of the dry season. You have a number of dead trees, and these trees would come down. They would block up gutters. They would block up drains. So as a community, we have to pay close attention to that, ensure that the drains are cleared, and ensure that the drains around our houses are cleared. So there are a number of things that we can do to help prevent it, but some of the high risk areas would be Central Ashton and the main Clifton areas, in the flat, spanning from, let's say, from the bank, that area all the way down, and then you have the back road, because we definitely have poor drainage in that area. So whether we like it or not, once we get a significant amount of rain, that area is definitely going to flood.
Right. And you have a comment here. Most importantly, is making that the gutters are cleared. That is what causes most of the flooding. So, Abdan, I want to thank you guys for being. I know your work is now starting. Rochelle,
Yeah.
you will be getting busy tomorrow. And any last messages you want to send out, Rochelle and Abdan?
I don't know if Rochelle
Um,
want to go first.
yeah, Rochelle, any last messages before we wrap up?
Just to remind us again that this is a unique hurricane season. We are dealing with two possible disasters should persons have to seek shelters. We're in a COVID pandemic. So you're not just looking at sheltering from the storm, but you're looking at keeping yourself protected health-wise as well. So make sure that you be prepared at all times. Bring all the necessary supplies that you need, especially your face masks and your sanitizers. Make sure that you remind your families and children when families come to these shelters. Make sure you keep your children together close. Don't have them running up and down. Try to everybody to keep within the distance, physical distance, and maintain all the other protocols that is guided from the Ministry of Health, so that while we're trying to keep ourselves safe during this storm, we are not exposing ourselves further to any health risk.
Yeah. So, Abdan.
I just it's all about preparedness. Just want to ask persons to, one, make the necessary checks around your house. Use it tomorrow to clear the drains. Cut any trees that are overhanging. Check your roof to make sure it is safe. We need water too, so check your spoutings, make sure that they're clean and they're cleared, because you don't want that extra water. If your spouting is blocked, running over, that only increase the water that is running off. So check those stuff. Check your family emergency plan. If you don't have one, don't worry about creating anything elaborate. It's just simply knowing what you have. Get your emergency kit ready. Stan, hope I can send you some information on that. Hope persons can prepare the emergency kits. Get them ready. Let everybody know what the plan is if they have to evacuate. So have both your emergency kit for at home, and get your emergency kit in the event that you may have to evacuate your home also ready. And just be safe, stay inside, and just pay attention to the authorities and the different media outlets that are giving information out there. that is intended to keep you safe.
And one of the things we have to our advantage is time. We have whole night tonight, we have whole day tomorrow, tomorrow night, and then into Saturday morning, where we would start seeing the first effects of tropical storm Gonzalo.
Exactly.
Yeah, so guys, I want to thank you again for joining, and we will try to meet tomorrow again if you're not too busy. Just to depends on the update. So I want to leave you with a quick video as we wrap up the show. I want to thank everyone on the live for coming out and who did some sharing. Very good, and Abdana, as I say, we're trying to make use of the technology so that persons. It's a bit different this year. Last year and the years before, we had a lot of posts, and this year we have the opportunity to link with Beckway and know what's going on in Union. The folks in Canoan are getting prepared. We're trying to get touching to Myro also. So I'm gonna leave you with a quick video as we wrap up the show, and I want to thank you guys for logging on.
Thanks for having us.
Season upon us. It's important to understand the categories of hurricanes and what that could mean for your home as they approach. Now, all hurricanes are rated on the Saffir-Simpson scale, and this is a measure of its wind speeds and only its wind speeds. So Category 1, this is when you get dangerous winds with minimal damage. Winds are 74 to 95 miles per hour. You can expect seeing some damage to your roof with shingles coming off or some minor tree damage in your yard. Now, this was the category that Florence was back in 2018. Now, Category 2 storm, this is when you start to see some more extreme winds with extensive damage. Wind speeds 96 to 110 miles per hour. You could start seeing some roadways getting blocked and some more tree damage as well as damage to your house. Now, Category 3 storm, this is when we get into some major hurricane status. This is extreme winds 111 to 129 miles per hour. You're going to start seeing more damage to your house, the sides of it as well as the roof, as well as power and electricity being out for days or weeks with a Category 3 storm. Now, Category 4, this is extreme winds with catastrophic damage. Winds 130 to 156 miles per hour. This is what Hugo was when it made landfall back in 1989. Now, you could start seeing roofs fall apart and exterior walls coming apart from your house, as well as large trees being uprooted from the wind. Now, Category 5 storm, this is 157 miles per hour or greater. All well-built homes aren't built to the test of these wind speeds and will all fall apart, and it could take months or years to recover from this kind of storm. And while wind damage is the way we rate these storms, there are plenty of other dangers with them, including storm surge, flooding, and severe weather that all accompany these storms. So it's important to stay weather aware and updated no matter what kind of storm is headed your direction. For News 19, I'm meteorologist Danielle Miller.